In researching folklore from the border country between Shropshire and Wales, I came across a fascinating publication by Wirt Sikes, 1880, British Goblins, Welsh Folklore, Fairy Mythology, Legends and Traditions. William Wirt Sikes, November 23rd, 1836 to August the 18th, 1883, was a journalist. Although Wirt was also apparently the US consul for Wales, which I find was in Cardiff, although of course at that point Wales didn't have a formal capital. The modern Welsh name for fairies is Tylwyth Teg. The fairy folk or family, they come in different varieties. Ellyllon, elves, Coblynau, mine fairies, Bwbachod, house fairies, Gwragedd Annwn, underwater fairies, and Gwyllion, mountain fairies. The Ellyllon are pigmy fairies who hunt the groves and the valleys. They dine on poisonous toadstools and fairy butter, which they extract from deep crevices in limestone rocks. Their hands are clad in foxglove gloves, which are, of course, a powerful sedative. They're sometimes kindly, sometimes menacing, but always mischievous. One variety of the Ellyllon are the Ellylldan, who wait in boggy wetland and flash their fiery lures to lead travellers off the safe path, sometimes to their death. And this seems to be the same as what Charlotte Byrne described as the will-o'-the-wisp. The Coblynau populate the mines, quarries and underground regions of Wales. They're about half a metre tall, very ugly to look at, and generally good-natured. They make a peculiar knocking or rapping sound to let miners know whereabouts a rich vein of ore can be found. The word Coblyn therefore means both knocker and sprite in Welsh. In 1874, the Oswestry Advertiser reported that strike action had been threatened at Kevin. A woman working as a messenger at one of the collieries commenced her duty each morning, greeting many miners going to work. Some of them considered it a bad omen to meet a woman first thing in the morning. They therefore threatened strike action unless the woman was dismissed. The Bwbachod are friendly goblins who help with chores at the home or on the farm. But to enlist their help, one must make a good fire last thing at night and leave a bowl of cream out for them to drink. It also means drinking of a good deal of ale, as the Bwbachod hate teetotalers. The Gwragedd Annwn are female fairies of the streams and lakes, particularly the isolated lakes of the high mountains, where they serve as interpreters between this world and the lower one of Annwn, the shadowy domain presided over by Gwyn ap Neath, the king of the fairies. The Gwyllion are female fairies. They haunt the lonely roads of the Welsh mountains. Like the Ellylldan, they have a habit of luring travellers away from their safety. In stormy weather, they will sometimes knock at the door and ask for refuge by the fire. To refuse them will likely result in great harm. Now, much of this fascinating book actually focuses on South Wales. And despite South Walians believing the north to be the land of the fairies. So what I've done is I've extracted those parts of North and Mid Wales folklore when it's relatively close to the Shropshire border. But least you should believe I'm discriminating against South Wales. Let me assure you that I went to Cardiff University and have a wonderful time in the city, many happy memories, especially at the Casablanca. So if you're listening and would like me to extract stories from South Wales or deeper into Mid and North Wales, please let me know in the comments. In Trefalgwys, near Ellyllon, there's a little shepherd's cottage that is commonly known as the place of strife. The inhabitants of the cottage were a man and his wife and their twins. The wife was called to her neighbours, forcing her to leave the children by themselves in the cradle. But many Tylwyth Teg were haunting the neighbourhood. On her way back, she was not a little terrified at seeing, though it was midday, some old elves in blue petticoats. She hastened home in great apprehension, but all was as she'd left it. But then the twins did not grow at all. The husband claimed they were not his children, causing the strife which gave its name to the cottage. One evening, when the woman was very heavy of heart, she determined to go and consult a conjurer. It was nearly harvest time, and the wise old man said to her, "When you're preparing dinner for the reapers, empty a shell of the hen's egg, and boil the shell full of pottage, and take it out through the door as if it was meant for a dinner to the reapers. And then listen what the twins will say. If you hear the children speaking things above the understanding of children, return to the house, take them, and throw them into the waves of Clean Ebar, which is very near to you. But if you don't hear anything remarkable, do them no injury." The woman did as she was told, and she went outside the door and listened, and she heard one of the children saying to the others, "Acorns before oaks, I know, an egg before a hen. No one hen's egg shall stew, enough for a harvest men." The mother returned to the house and took the two children and threw them into the Clean, and suddenly the goblins in their blue trousers came to save their dwarfs. The mother got her own children back, and the strife between her and her husband ended. Ghost dressed in black clothes with a white wig on, looking like a clergy, was spotted on horseback outside a pub one night, and a man went outside to investigate. The ghost bowed and silently offered him a drink, but this was declined. Thereupon the ghost lifted his hat, crooked his elbow, and said in a hollow tone, "Atoch chui sia, towards you, sir." But others who were there could not see anything and hear nothing. The ghost then said, "Go to Clifford Castle in Radnorshire. Take out some money which is hidden there and throw it in the river. Do this, I charge thee, or thou shalt have no rest." More explicit directions were then given, and the man set out for Clifford Castle. Clifford Castle is where Fair Rosamond, King Henry II's beautiful favourite, was born. Only he was allowed to enter the castle, although his friends remained at the ruined gate. He was guided to the place where the money was, and ran with it and flung it into the river. After that he was haunted no more. David Lloyd, the Welsh musician, was once in Ellyllon. He was going home late at night and saw a boy from his neighbourhood. He asked the lad if he'd like a ride home behind him, and the boy took up behind the horse's back. They rode swiftly and they were home in no time, but the boy lost one of his garters in the journey. The next day the garter was found hanging in an ash tree near the church, suggesting that the journey had been through the spirit world. Such beliefs are common in Java, where I now live, my own wife having been taught the spell to achieve this feat as a child, but also warned of the danger of being stuck in the spirit world. Edward Roberts of Llangonclow had a spirit at his farm. A servant was threshing. The hay was taken out of his hand and thrown upon the hayloft. At first he didn't think much about it, but when the trick had been repeated 3 or 4 times, he became concerned about it and went into the house to report it. Edward himself was away when his wife and the maidservant laughed at the servant and merrily said they would go to the barn to protect him. And so they went out there and sat, and one knit and the other winded yarn. They were not there long before their things were taken out of their hands and tumbled across the barn. On returning to the house, they found the dishes and shelves moving to and fro, and some were thrown onto the stone floor and broken. That night there was a terrible clattering amongst the dishes, and the next morning broken crockery was all over the floor. Neighbours came to see. People even came from far to satisfy their curiosity. Some from as far as Knighton, and one who came from Knighton to read prayers for exercising the spirit had the book taken out of his hand and thrown upstairs. Stones were cast at people, and once iron was projected from the chimney at them. At last the spirit set the house on fire and nothing could put it out. The house was burnt to the ground. Nothing but walls and 2 chimneys stood to greet the people who passed to and from Knighton Market. The Reverend R. Tibbet was a Montgomeryshire dissenting minister, and one night he was sleeping in a house with another person in the bed with him. They had a tussle with the Tridalch spirit for possession of the bedclothes. Praying and pulling, the parson beat the spirit and kept the bedclothes. But the spirit, apparently angered by his failure, struck the bed with a cownen, a vessel to hold grain, with such a blow that the bed was knocked out of its place. Then they lit a light and the spirit left them alone. At a place known as Llanwent in Radnorshire, the owner and his wife were away, but the rest of the family were sitting down to supper, when 3 of the servants heard the sound of horses coming towards the house and cried, "They're coming," thinking it was the master and mistress returning home. But on going out there to meet them, there was nobody there. They re-entered the house, somewhat uneasy, and when they were seated, "Hark," said one, and all intense listening heard footsteps passing by them and going upstairs, and voices of people talking amongst themselves. Not long afterwards, 3 of the family felt sick and died. The Tylwyth has one other form of that voice which speaks in a simple and natural manner, but profound words. Edward Lloyd of Llangruig was lying very ill when people visited him, and they would hear the voice near them, but they could see no one, nor could they find anyone. They heard it utter so distinctly, and it seemed to be in the room where they were, with these words, "Amai nabren atin ani cracio." The beams of the house cracketh. And so the voice spoke again, "Faidor anaman aman." It will presently break. And once more it spoke, "Dina fine antori." There it breaks. That moment, Edward died. A traditional solemn dance took place in the churchyard at St Almeida's Church, Breconshire, on St Almeida's Day. The dance was led round the churchyard with a song, and then the dancers, falling down in a trance, followed by a sort of religious frenzy. This is believed to have been an ancient Druid rite. Wirt wrote that on the Welsh border, a Halloween custom amongst children is of going from house to house, singing this rhyme: whistle, wastle, bread and puzzle, cawa da plasiama, an apple or a pear, a plum or a cherry, or any good thing to make us merry, soul cakes. Pray you, good missus, a soul cake, 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, and 3 for the good man that made us all. The roads are very dirty, my shoes are very thin, I've got a little pocket to put a penny in. Up with the kettle and down with the pan, give us an answer and we'll begin. You may recall a similar rhyme reported by Charlotte Byrne when speaking of Shropshire folklore. And indeed both seem somewhat familiar to what I used to, or seem to remember I sung as a child. The legend of the Bell of Rhaeadr in the 12th century, a knight was imprisoned in the castle of Rhaeadr. His wife, being devoted to him, sought the aid of the monks to get him out. They provided for her service a magical bell which possessed the power of liberating from the confinement any prisoner who should be set it upon the wall and ring it. The wife succeeded in getting the bell secretly into the husband's possession, and he set it up on the wall and rang it. But although he gathered his belongings together and was fully prepared to go, the doors of the prison refused to open. The defenders mocked the magical bell, but then the castle was struck by lightning, and both it and the town were burned in one night, except for the only wall upon which the magic bell was hanging. Nothing remains of the castle walls to this day, although there is evidence that it was destroyed by some other Welsh forces at the end of the 12th century, having been held by the English for a short time until it was captured by the Welsh and destroyed in 1202.